We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
That no options could be ruled out.
Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam said China intervening to end months of pro-democracy protests is an option, following a particularly violent week of unrest that paralyzed the city.
The NBA faces boycott calls and online attacks in China after becoming embroiled in a controversy over Hong Kong's democracy protests, as state-run media delivers a blunt warning for global brands to avoid Chinese politics.
The U.S. Commerce Department announces it is blacklisting 28 Chinese entities that it says are implicated in rights violations and abuses targeting Uyghurs and other mostly Muslim minorities in the Xinjiang region.
Syria.
And U.S. President Donald Trump warns Turkey against going too far in Syria, one day after giving Ankara a green light to invade its southern neighbor and sparking panic among Washington's Kurdish allies.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam said she would not rule out accepting help from mainland China to restore order in Hong Kong if the situation with protests becomes too bad. The financial hub has been gripped by 4 months of rallies, and last weekend it just saw much of the city grind to a halt as masked demonstrators took to the streets in defiance of a controversial ban on face coverings.
Questions. Well, first of all, it is too early to say that the anti-mask law is not effective. I'm sure you will agree that for any new policy or new legislation, it will take time for it to be effectively implemented. At this point in time, I still strongly feel that we should find the solutions ourselves. That is also the position of the central government, that Hong Kong should tackle the problem on her own. Okay? But if the situation becomes so bad, then no options could be ruled out if we want Hong Kong to at least to have another chance.
So as we heard there, as much of the city returned to work after a 3-day weekend, Mrs. Lam told reporters that while she believes the city's authorities can cope with the unprecedented troubles, China could be called upon if the situation becomes so bad. Mrs. Lam has faced widespread criticism over her decision to ban face masks, ubiquitous in Hong Kong since a deadly SARS outbreak in 2003, and thousands of Hong Kongers flouted the prohibition during an unsanctioned mass march on Sunday. Now, so far, 2 people, a male university student and a 38-year-old woman, have been charged with illegally wearing masks. The 2 were charged with unlawful assembly, which carries up to 3 years jail time, and with defying the mask ban, which has a maximum 1-year sentence. Both were released on bail. Mrs. Lam also said she would not be drawn on a suggestion by one of her cabinet members, the veteran pro-Beijing politician Ip Kwan Him, that Hong Kong may curb access to the internet in a bid to contain the protests. The leader insisted she was very committed to using political, legal, and policy instruments, including dialogue, to address some of the deep-seated problems in the city.
China on Tuesday pulled NBA exhibition games from television screens as the league faced an escalating punishment campaign in the lucrative Chinese market, ignited by an American basketball executive's pro-democracy tweet. However, the National Basketball Association faced a counterattack in the United States, where presidential candidates and influential senators accused it of kowtowing to authoritarian China. The crisis erupted Friday when Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey tweeted support for protesters in the semi-autonomous southern Chinese city of Hong Kong who are demanding greater freedoms. The league initially put out statements that senior U.S. politicians slammed as bowing to China for financial reasons, while Rocket star guard James Harden apologized. But NBA Commissioner Adam Silver on Monday insisted his organization supported Morey's right to express his opinions. A Chinese state-run broadcaster responded on Tuesday, announcing it had shelved plans to broadcast a pair of pre-season exhibition games to be held in China this week and was considering more punishments. The NBA found itself being smashed by both sides in a reflection of the broader tensions between the global superpowers. In the United States, Democratic presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke, a Texan, deemed the NBA's initial statements an embarrassment. Florida Senator Marco Rubio, a Republican, also accused the NBA of throwing Morey under the bus to protect NBA's market access in China. And Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, a Democrat, warned no one should implement a gag rule on Americans speaking out for freedom.
Meanwhile, the United States is to blacklist more than 20 Chinese entities that it says are implicated in rights violations and abuses targeting Uyghurs and other mostly Muslim minorities in the Xinjiang region, according to U.S. Commerce Department. The United States cannot and will not tolerate the brutal suppression of ethnic minorities within China, Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross said, announcing the move which bars the named entities from purchasing U.S. products. The ban comes amid heightened tensions between the U.S. and China, particularly over trade policy and Beijing's actions in the western Xinjiang region. The U.S. has meanwhile stepped up its rhetoric against Beijing over its policies in the western Xinjiang region. Rights groups say China has detained around 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslims in re-education camps in the region. Actions that Washington has said are reminiscent of Nazi Germany.
German prosecutors on Tuesday were probing whether a terrorist motive led a man to hijack an articulated lorry and smash it into cars stopped at a traffic light in the city of Limburg, injuring several people. Media outlets identified the driver as a Syrian asylum seeker in his early 30s who arrived with a massive migrant influx to Germany in 2015. Public broadcaster ZDF quoted security authorities as saying they believed the incident had a terrorist backdrop, but the prosecutor's office in Frankfurt declined to confirm this. News agency DPA, citing security sources, said the suspect was known to the police for drug offenses and grievous bodily harm, but had no apparent links to the Islamist scene. Police searched his home in the nearby town of Langen overnight. The original driver of the truck, who was not named, was quoted by Daily Frankfurter Neue Presse as saying a man had dragged him out of his lorry. I asked him what to do. What do you want from me? He told FNP he didn't say a word. The truck sped into the parked cars a few hundred meters away and came to a stop on the central reservation of a 6-lane road. When the man behind the wheel of the truck emerged from the crash, several passers-by provided first aid. The passers-by said the driver said Allah several times and spoke Arabic. Germany has been on alert following several jihadist attacks in recent years claimed by the Islamic State group. The most deadly was committed in 2016 by a 23-year-old Tunisian who killed 12 people when he stole a truck and plowed it through a Berlin Christmas market.
French President Emmanuel Macron vowed an unrelenting fight against Islamist extremists as he paid tribute to the 4 Paris police staff stabbed to death last week by a radicalized colleague. Michael Harpin, a 45-year-old computer expert in the police intelligence gathering department, used a kitchen knife and an oyster shocker to kill 3 male and 1 female colleague in a 30-minute rampage that ended when an officer shot him in the head. The attack in the police's inner sanctum caused shock in France, where the government is being pressed to answer how Harpin's radicalization went unnoticed, despite him having high-level security clearance. We will wage an unrelenting fight in the face of Islamist terrorism, President Macron vowed at a ceremony at the police headquarters near Notre Dame Cathedral, where the attack took place. President Macron also said it was inconceivable and unacceptable that Harpin, who had worked for the police since 2003, had managed to carry out an attack in the very place where, quote, we pursue terrorists and criminals. He blamed the attack on a distorted, deadly Islam, which he vowed to eradicate, and vowed to build in France a society in a state of vigilance.
A suspect has been arrested and charged with the murders of 4 homeless men in New York City. Randy Santos, 24, was arrested Sunday afternoon by the New York Police Department and charged with 4 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and unlawful possession of marijuana. On Saturday night, a homeless man wielding a metal pipe beat 4 other homeless people to death Saturday in New York, police said.
When the responding officers arrived at the location, they discovered an unconscious male lying in the street with severe head trauma. A second male with head trauma also approached the officers at the scene. 2 witnesses informed the responding officers that an unknown male wearing a black jacket and in black pants struck the victim numerous times in the head with a metal object. An expanded search of the area revealed 3 additional victims, 2 in front of 2 East Broadway and 1 in front of 17 East Broadway. The 3 males on East Broadway had severe head trauma and were pronounced deceased at the scene. The 1 male at 2 Bowery was pronounced deceased at the scene. The second male at 2 Bowery was transported to Cornell Hospital in critical condition.
Every night, more than 63,000 people sleep in the New York City shelter system, says the Bowery Mission, an advocacy group, but nearly 4,000 more sleep on the street, in the subway, or in other public areas. The group says factors causing homelessness include mental illness, substance abuse, lack of affordable housing, and problems keeping a job.
In other news, U.S. President Donald Trump warned Turkey against going too far in Syria, 1 day after giving Ankara a green light to invade its southern neighbor and sparking panic among Washington's Kurdish allies. The U.S. pulled back 50 to 100 special operators from Syria's northern frontier, where they have served as a buffer between the Turkish military and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces after President Trump's surprise announcement in advance of an expected operation ordered by Ankara. In a day of foreign policy turmoil, President Trump came under heavy criticism from top Republicans for abandoning the Kurds, who were crucial in the years-long campaign to defeat Islamic State.
Suffering can lead.
Turkey, Syria, let them take care of it. Let them take care of it. We want to bring our troops back home. It's been many, many years. It's been decades in many cases. We want to bring our troops back home. And I got elected on that. If you go back and look at our speeches, I would say we want to bring our troops back home from these endless wars. And we're like a police force over there. We're policing. We're not fighting, we're policing. I have told Turkey that if they do anything outside of what we would think is humane, to use the word a second time, we talk about Hong Kong, we talk about this, they could suffer the wrath of an extremely decimated economy.
European powers, meanwhile, warned against a threatened Turkish offensive in northern Syria. They said the move, which has been facilitated by a U.S. pullout, would boost the Islamic State group and spark a new refugee crisis. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has long threatened that an operation against Kurdish militants in northern Syria, who Ankara regards as terrorists, could come any night without warning. The Turkish operation appeared imminent after President Trump said that U.S. forces in the region would stand aside, effectively abandoning the Kurdish People's Protection Units, or YPG militia, which had been an important American ally in the fight against ISIS jihadists.
The European Union on Monday warned that a threatened Turkish offensive against a Kurdish militia in northeast Syria would harm civilians and cause massive displacement of people.
We can reaffirm that while recognizing Turkey's legitimate security concern, the European Union has from the very beginning said that any sustainable solution to the Syrian conflict will not be reached by or through military means, but requires a genuine political transition. Renewed armed hostilities in the northeast will not only exacerbate civilian suffering and lead to massive displacement, but will also risk severely undermining current political efforts, which we, as you know, support.
Turkey has sent reinforcements to the border in recent weeks, and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has warned the long-threatened operation against Kurdish militants Ankara regards as terrorists could come any night without warning. President Donald Trump has given his blessing to the Turkish operation, saying the U.S. would stand aside when Turkey advances, effectively abandoning the Kurdish People's Protection Units, or YPG militia, which had been an important American ally in the fight against the Islamic State group.
In other news, hundreds of indigenous people and farmers clashed with Ecuadorian armed forces as they marched toward the capital, Quito, to protest against rising fuel prices. Take a look. Now, people were seen facing off with riot police, with tear gas being fired as demonstrators took to the streets of Quito on Monday in a fifth day of protests against the elimination of fuel subsidies announced by the Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno. The elimination of fuel subsidies is designed to ease Ecuador's debt burden, with the country forced to impose public spending cuts as part of a loan deal with the International Monetary Fund. The clashes came also as Ecuador's Ministry of Energy announced that activities in 3 oil fields in the Amazon region, one operated by private firm Petrobel and the others by state company Petro Amazonas, had been suspended due to the seizure of the facilities by groups of people outside the operation. The seizures affected 12% of the country's oil production, or 63,250 barrels of crude per day, according to the ministry in a statement that did not identify the groups responsible. In a radio and television address, meanwhile, President Lenin Moreno accused his predecessor and ex-ally Rafael Correa and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro of an attempted coup d'etat and of using some indigenous groups, taking advantage of their mobilization to plunder and destroy.
U.S. President Donald Trump labeled the ongoing impeachment inquiry against him as a scam during a press conference following the signing of a U.S.-Japan trade agreement at the White House in Washington, D.C. on Monday.
You can't impeach a president for doing a great job. You can't impeach a president for having the lowest and best unemployment numbers that we've had in 51 years. You can't impeach a president for tax cuts and regulation cuts and creating, and even the ambassador would say, the strongest economy in the world.
President Trump is alleged to have asked Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky to find damaging information on the business dealings of Hunter Biden, the son of Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden, during a phone call. Hunter Biden was a board member at a Ukrainian gas company between 2014 and 2019. President Trump said that, as president, I have an obligation to end corruption, even if that means requesting the help of a foreign country or countries. It is done all the time.
For tax cuts and regulation cuts and creating, and even the ambassador would say this.
Eagle News, we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Tungkulin ng MTRCV ang mag-provide na appropriate ratings sa lahat ng TV shows. Para ugaliin ng pamilya ang responsableng panonood. Teamwork tayo, parents!
Rated G, good for all. Oops, rated PG.
Dapat may mga magulang para sagutin ang mga tanong ng kabataan.
Grabe, rated SPG, maselan!
Higpitan ang paggabay.
Pag-rated MTRCV, rated responsable.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Open for Business, from vision to action.
U.S. President Donald Trump hailed a banner day for American farmers, announcing 2 trade agreements with Japan that he said would deepen economic ties in agriculture and digital commerce. Take a look.
These 2 deals represent a tremendous victory for both of our nations. They will create countless jobs, expand investment and commerce, reduce our trade deficit very substantially, promote fairness and reciprocity, and unlock the vast opportunities for growth.
Now, under the agreement, Japan will cut tariffs for $7 billion in U.S. farm exports, including beef and pork, while reducing markups on purchases of American wheat and barley. In return, Washington has agreed to cut U.S. tariffs on $40 million in Japanese agricultural goods and to ease tariff rate quotas on the country's beef, allowing Japan to compete for a greater share of the U.S. market. In a separate agreement, U.S. and Japanese officials have also agreed to eliminate duties on digital products like videos, music, and e-books, as well as ensure cross-border that data transfers are barrier-free. Japanese officials also said last month that Washington had promised not to impose tariffs on Japanese auto exports, a threat President Trump has held over major trading partners since last year.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson thinks his talks with the EU will fail and that he will then have to do all sorts of things to prevent another Brexit delay, a government official told The Spectator magazine. But should an extension still be granted at next week's EU summit, Johnson will not resubmit his current proposal, the source in Johnson's Downing Street office said. It said he would campaign for a potentially chaotic no-deal Brexit in a snap general election. The source was quoted as saying late Monday by the magazine, which has traditionally supported the ruling Conservative Party. Downing Street did not comment on the story. and made no effort to deny or refute it in any way. Johnson promises to take Britain out of the European Union by the twice-delayed October 31 deadline. The Prime Minister is widely expected to try and find a loophole in parliamentary legislation that requires him to seek a Brexit delay if no new deals comes through by October 19, the day after an EU leaders summit ends in Brussels. A new Brexit proposal he outlined last Wednesday aimed at avoiding a hard border between EU members, Ireland and the British province of Northern Ireland after Brexit has been received poorly in Brussels.
As we have said, problematic points in the United Kingdom's proposal, and further work is needed, but that work needs to be done by the United Kingdom and not the other way round. We would remind you that it's the UK leaving the European Union and not the European Union leaving the UK, and we are doing everything in our power to ensure that that exit is on an orderly basis, and we are willing to engage constructively with our counterparts, but we are not going to be the ones left holding the bag, the ball, or any other kind of object.
I think Prime Minister Johnson's proposals this week were a step in the right direction. They do deal in a way that moves us all forward, I think, with regulatory alignment on the island of Ireland for goods, for agri-food product. But there are problems with that proposal. We don't see how the proposal to have two different customs territories in the island of Ireland can avoid customs checks between those territories, between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We don't see how that works, and I think the EU has the same concern. We recognise that this is a serious proposal from the British, but we also acknowledge that there are a number of big problems with it. And so if it is the basis of a stepping stone, if you like, to a proposal that can be the basis of a deal, then I think it's a really good thing. I hope.
The British pound dived Tuesday after German Chancellor Angela Merkel reportedly warned that a Brexit deal was overwhelmingly unlikely, stoking fears of a disorderly and costly departure from the EU. Ms. Merkel told British Prime Minister Boris Johnson that a deal was doomed to fail unless London agreed to keep British-run Northern Ireland that borders EU member Ireland in the bloc's customs union, a Downing Street source was quoted as saying. The host of next week's European Summit, EU Council President Donald Tusk, in turn blasted British Prime Minister Boris Johnson of trying to shift blame for the failure of the Brexit talks. In late morning deals, the European single currency advanced as high as 89.94 pence, while the pound dived as low as 1.2226.
Immigration New Zealand will be making major changes to the way employers recruit migrants. Our ABC correspondent there, Greg Bessa, talks to the chair of New Zealand's Association for Migration and Investment, who will explain how OFWs and other foreign workers will be affected by these new changes to work visas. Greg?
The overseas Filipino workers and other migrants are a vital part of New Zealand economy as they are providing the needed skills, knowledge, and manpower to the country's crucial sectors such as dairy farming, horticulture, beekeeping, nursing and aged care, information technology, building and construction, and many more. As these migrant workers are ready and willing to continually providing the skilled labor essentially needed in this beautiful and inclusive country, they are now worrying about the changes of work visa rules as announced by the New Zealand government just recently. June Ranson, Chair of New Zealand Association for Migration and Investment, a professional organization of immigration lawyers and licensed immigration advisors, explains the impact of the recent work visa changes. Being the managing director of the Woburn International Immigration Consultancy, she has been in the New Zealand immigration advice industry for more than 25 years.
June, just recently the Immigration New Zealand
has made an announcement about the changes on the work visa procedures. Now, in a nutshell, can you explain what these work visa changes are all about?
Well, a lot of people have been misinterpreting what is going on, because the only immediate change which comes into effect is on the 7th of October, and that relates to employers' accreditation schemes. So anybody who already holds what is known as a work to residence or a talent visa through an accredited employer is not going to be affected. It is going forward after the 7th of October that to get that visa, the employer has to increase their salary offering to $79,560 per annum. From the middle of next year approximately going forward, so we're talking 2020 and 2021, there are going to be changes coming through, and they are going to be relating to the work visas. Now, currently, when people are looking for getting a work visa, it's very much connected to the job that is going to be offered, and it's been controlled by what is known as ANZCO. And ANZCO determines the salary code, the qualifications, and the skills required for the job. Now, the change that's going to come through, because they're going to eliminate ANZCO, it's going to be controlled by salaries.
No,
absolutely.
And then another claim by the government that with the with the work visa changes, those migrant workers who are being classified as low skilled, they could now bring in their families when the changes become effective.
Now that's another good thing, but what hasn't been spelt out clearly, that in bringing in those families, and these are low skilled people, and they would be earning a salary below 52,000 New Zealand dollars per year, their partner can only be obtaining a visitor visa.
Okay.
Okay? So for them to be able to work, they have to apply in their own right and meet the requirements for getting a job and being able to get a work visa.
Now, this particular issue has really worried the migrant workers in general, and especially for the overseas Filipino workers who are been doing their job very good. They're being hired because of their skills and being hardworking. Now, this said, with the recent work visa changes, getting a residency would become harder and difficult for them.
Yes.
So, is that true?
Yes.
So what will happen then? What can you say about this one?
Well, there's still going to be the requirement that they have 160 points or greater.
Okay.
Okay, it's all based on points. But below 52,000 salary per annum, it is not going to be possible unless there are some extenuating circumstances regarding that individual to be given any possibility. It's not seen that if they're earning under 52,000, they will get a pathway to residence.
The recent announcement of the government of the work visa changes, experts do believe that it's being aimed at reducing those migrants becoming residents, while at the same time increasing the number of temporary workers in New Zealand. So the government is preventing those migrant workers to become permanent residents.
Correct.
So this one is one of the issues that really worrying these migrant workers?
New Zealand, they're aiming at the highly skilled people that they want. Now, I don't want us to overlook the category which is on the current long-term skill shortage list, because that's going to be revisited on a regular basis. And if a job is actually listed on that list, it still gives the opportunity for the migrant to get a work to residence visa. You can well see that the employer would be very keen to be increasing the salary.
No.
But at the current time, when they've got these long waits, it's not a good balance to be paying that sort of salary and having to wait so long. It's not a comfort thing for an employer.
No. Now, my last question, June, is about the article that you penned down, and it was published on the website of Radio New Zealand.
Yes.
And you said work visa changes, the devil is in the detail.
Yes.
What do you mean by this one?
What I mean is, look, there's been no policy written as yet. The Minister has made his announcement on what the intentions are. So what happens now, so that we can actually understand really what is going to happen, then there's got to be a lot of work done behind the scenes so that we can understand what are the key points that are going to come into being so that these people can really understand.
Majority, if not all, of overseas Filipino workers and their migrant counterparts are looking forward to making New Zealand as their permanent home, wherein they can work to the best of their knowledge, skills, and ability. Yet, the recent announcement of work visa changes has created uncertainty for them, at least for now. From Wellington City, New Zealand, this is Greg Bessa. I am and will always be one with 25.
Since 1964, the Neil S. Blaisdell Center in Honolulu has brought memorable moments for audiences, not just in Hawaii, but even around the world. And now the Blaisdell is set to undergo major construction, which comes with a heavy price tag and some scrutiny by public officials. Our Hawaii correspondent, Georgie Carnate, has the details.
I think our community leaders saw it as the way we see it now, as sort of the center for the culture and arts in our community.
Located east of downtown Honolulu, between South King Street and Kapilani Boulevard, is Hawaii's largest and most popular community complex, the Neil S. Blaisdell Center. This includes the concert hall, exhibition center, and arena. The city's Director of Enterprise Services took some time to share with Eagle News about the rich history of this place.
So the campus that we're sitting on right now, the Neil S. Blaisdell Center, opened in 1964 as the Honolulu International Center, 22 acres. To me, it's a great story. It replaced the Honolulu Civic Auditorium, which was a couple blocks down the road on King Street from where we are. Very modest facility, probably sat on about an acre to an acre and a half of land, one structure that everything fit into. Wrestling, concerts, roller derby, graduations. Our civic and community leaders at the time had a much grander vision. They took us from this postage stamp of land on one facility to a multi-facility venue on 22 acres of land. I believe this site was selected because from looking at the newspaper stories at the time, it was lamented as the last open space in Honolulu. In 1964, they were talking about how we were taking the last open space in Honolulu and creating this gathering place.
For more than 5 decades, the Blaisdell became the gathering place for events like concerts and other events for many famous people. One of those celebrities was Elvis Presley, who is still remembered to this day for his live performance that was also shown worldwide by satellite in January 1973. Eagle News got to visit the very dressing room where the king of rock and roll prepared for the historic concert. Meanwhile, one organization that utilized Blaisdell's facilities through the years is the Iglesia Ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, as seen here during their most recent event.
The grand celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Church of Christ in the 58th state has just concluded here in Blaisdell Arena.
Guy also described the city's goal to finally give the Blaisdell a new and refreshing look. The price tag for this master plan is currently almost $800 million.
Right. Our goals for the designers was, one, water has always been a significant part of this campus that needed to be in the future. Two, the Blaisdell, when it was first conceived and opened, was dedicated as a memorial to Hawaii's veterans, and we wanted to rededicate it in that fashion. So there needed to be a significant component to the design that honored that nature of the Blaisdell. And so we have this War Memorial Plaza that is one of the major entries into the future campus. Basically, everything on the campus is rebuilt other than the concert hall. That will stay and be significantly renovated in the interior. A little bit of the exterior will be touched. The rest of the campus comes down and gets rebuilt, but the arena is going to look like it was rehabilitated as opposed to rebuilt. We're rebuilding it to look the same.
Guy and other city leaders have acknowledged the concerns of clients who frequently use Blaisdell's facilities and have repeatedly engaged with them with hopes of maintaining their trust and loyalty during and after the construction period.
We have several annual tenants, and some who have seasons here. The ballet has a season, the symphony has a season, Hawaii Opera Theater has a season. And we've been talking to those groups and many more, especially the ones that also have exhibitions, about alternatives. The unfortunate thing is the city doesn't have an alternative. We don't have another facility that these folks could go into and hold their events while we're under construction. But we've been having a dialogue with them, and we feel like we've had it early enough that they can start to look for alternatives on their own. And we were concerned that all of our efforts to try to keep a particular facility open may not end up being beneficial if people, for one reason or another, decide they don't want to come down to a construction site to see an event. So the easiest thing was to say, we'll close the facility all at once. If we have an opportunity to roll venues back online one at a time, then we would do that. So presently we haven't been taking bookings for anything past December of 2020, which is our scheduled closure.
Reporting from Honolulu, Hawaii, this is Joe G. Carnate, Eagle News. I am 1 with 25.
Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Soccer, the world's favorite sport. And it's no wonder. Spectacular goals and plenty of emotion. The best of game day. Kickoff.
Climate protesters from Sydney to London blocked roads on Monday, sparking mass arrests at the start of 2 weeks of civil disobedience, demanding immediate action to save the Earth from extinction. Crowds chained themselves to vehicles and other structures and unrolled sleeping bags in the middle of streets in defiance of police across Europe and parts of Asia and Africa. The year-old group Extinction Rebellion, or the year-old group Extinction Rebellion has energized a global movement demanding governments drastically cut the carbon emissions that scientists have shown to cause devastating climate change. They are backed by Greta Thunberg, the Swedish teenager whose searing UN address in September made international headlines and by academics studying the rising temperatures and sea levels. Their protests have irritated drivers and some officials, but raised the hopes of those who see climate change as a threat to the planet. The movement is partially credited with pushing the UK government in June to become the first in the European Union to commit itself to a net zero target for harmful emissions by 2050. But now Extinction Rebellion is demanding governments reach that target by 2025.
It was a major killer in the West until the mid-20th century, tuberculosis. It remains a menace in developing countries and killed more than 400,000 people in India in 2017. The government of Narendra Modi has set an ambitious target of overcoming the TB epidemic by 2025. Take a look.
We have the highest burden in terms of drug-resistant TB in the world globally, and again, it's difficult to deal with, and it needs the right kind of diagnosis. But there is medication available now, except the access to these drugs is limited, and they are pretty expensive.
The only way to move towards a reduction of numbers is find as many as possible, and remember that every TB patient, every undiagnosed, untreated patient infects 12 others. When you find one case and you treat him well, you have stopped the fountainhead.
Three physician scientists share the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine, and one of them is U.S. researcher William Kaelin. He describes winning the Nobel Medicine Prize 2019 as a surreal experience during a news conference at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston after he was awarded the prize with two other scientists for their research into how human cells sense and adapt to changing oxygen levels.
And at that point, I think it was just so surreal, and I sort of had this out-of-body feeling of just great appreciation. And again, I'm just so thrilled to share this with all the people who have meant so much to me in my life. There are many diseases characterized by inadequate oxygen delivery, one of which is anemia, but also certain cardiovascular diseases. And so now, for the first time, we have pharmacological tools that can activate this pathway and can trick the body into, for example, thinking you've gone to the top of Mount Everest. I am a cancer biologist and a cancer physician, but the first truly new approved drug coming out of my laboratory was a treatment for anemia. Okay, and I always tell people that that's the way science works. So, for example, when say a family member has lost their loved one to some cancer, and they say, "I want to support research on that cancer," I tell them that's fine, but the next big breakthrough for that cancer might come from the person working down the hallway on a completely different cancer.
It's a good day for Hopkins, I think.
The other is U.S. researcher Greg Semenza, who works at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore.
Most of the chemotherapy drugs are designed to kill dividing cells that are well oxygenated. There are no treatments that are approved to treat the hypoxic cells within the cancer. And we believe it's these cells that survive the therapy and come back and kill the patient. So one of our major goals is to try to identify drugs that will inhibit HIF activity as an addition to existing cancer therapies, and we hope that that will help to improve outcome in a number of solid cancers where once the cancer has metastasized, there aren't really effective therapies.
Americans William Kalin and Greg Semenza and Britain's Peter Ratcliffe will split the 9 million Swedish kroner, or that's $914,000 award, while the fact that humans need oxygen to survive has been understood for centuries. How the body registers and responds to oxygen was little known prior to the trio's pioneering work. Semenza studied a gene known as EPO, which causes the body to create more red blood cells, and isolated the specific DNA segments that help it to adapt to low oxygen levels. Ratcliffe and Semenza then applied this knowledge to show that the oxygen sensing mechanism was present in virtually all human tissues.
So the system we discovered is a sensor, like a thermostat is to heat, and it senses a level of oxygen and enables the cells to adjust their behavior if there isn't enough. And as you may know, low oxygen complicates most or many human diseases, so in that circumstance the cells need to adjust, and this is a mechanism by which they do so. A lot of our work is going on, trying to understand whether there are other systems, the circumstances in which they operate, and the role played by this system in cancer, the role that enables cancer to develop and grow, for which it needs oxygen and for which it activates this system.
Fascinating. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles, and we're one with 25.